My teenage best friend's boss paid her $30 an hour, upgraded her to late-night BMW pickups, and impregnated her while pretending his divorce was pending. When we exposed him, he tried to sue us for defamation, so we torched his reputation in the worst way imaginable. My best friend Sarah started tutoring the single dad's son 3 houses down from us. She was 16 and needed money for prom, and the dad paid her $30 an hour, which was insane for just helping a 4th grader with math homework. At first, it made total sense. Sarah was valedictorian track, and the kid Jake was struggling in school after his parents' messy divorce. The dad worked late at some finance job downtown, and seemed genuinely grateful someone responsible could help his son. But then Sarah showed up to school with a new Michael Kors bag. Mr. Davidson gave me a bonus for getting Jake's grades up, she told our lunch table while pulling out a brand new iPhone. The rest of us were still using cracked iPhone 8s from middle school. Things got weird when she started going over there on Tuesday nights when Jake was at his mom's place. I'm helping organize his homework station and making study guides for the week, she explained. Her parents ate it up because Mr. Davidson had started texting them about how amazing Sarah was and how she was really making a difference in Jake's life. I started noticing other things. Sarah would put on body spray before walking over there. She wore her good jeans instead of sweats. One time I was scrolling through Find My Friends at midnight and saw she was still at his house. When I asked her about it the next morning, she said Jake had a big test and they lost track of time. The gifts kept coming. New Nikes that she said were for being reliable. A gold necklace for going above and beyond. She even had a $200 Sephora haul that she claimed was a birthday present, even though her birthday was 3 months away. Everything changed when Mr. Davidson started picking her up from school. It's easier than me walking over, she said when I asked why a grown man was waiting in the pickup line with all the parents. He'd wave at us from his BMW and Sarah would practically skip to his car. My mom made a comment one night at dinner about how nice it was that Sarah found such a good job. That's when something clicked for me. This wasn't just a job anymore. I'd seen how Sarah looked at him and how she'd light up when his texts came through. The next weekend, I convinced Sarah to sleep over at my house. We were painting our nails and scrolling through TikTok when I purposely searched for videos about inappropriate relationships. I found this whole series about teenage girls who dated older men thinking it was love. Sarah was laughing at first, saying the girls were stupid for not seeing the red flags. But then this one girl started talking about how the man made her feel special and mature and different from other girls her age. Sarah's face went white. The girl in the video mentioned gifts and special attention and promises about their future together. Sarah's hand started shaking and the nail polish bottle tipped over onto my comforter. She ran to my bathroom and I heard her throwing up. When she finally came out, she was sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. "I'm pregnant," she whispered into my shoulder. "I'm pregnant, and he said we'll be together for real when I turn 18 and that he'll divorce his wife." I felt my stomach drop. "Wait, what wife? He's divorced." Sarah shook her head. "They're separated. He says she's crazy and won't sign the papers, but once I'm 18, we can be together officially." She told me everything. How it started with longer tutoring sessions and him confiding in her about his marriage problems. How he said she was so mature and understanding. How they'd been sleeping together for 2 months and he bought her things to show how much she meant to him. We told my mom that night, then Sarah's parents, then the police. Turns out Mr. Davidson had done this before at his last job in Arizona. His wife wasn't crazy. She was trying to protect other girls by not signing divorce papers that would let him move freely. The police station smelled like burnt coffee and cleaning supplies. Sarah's parents sat on either side of her while she gave her statement to Detective Martinez, a woman with kind eyes who kept pushing a box of tissues across the table. I waited in the lobby with my mom, watching the clock tick past midnight. My phone buzzed with texts from our friend group asking where Sarah was, why she'd missed Megan's birthday party. I didn't know what to tell them. When they finally came out, Sarah's mom was crying and her dad's face was red with rage. "We're pressing charges," he said to no one in particular. Sarah looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, wrapped in her mom's cardigan. The detective gave them paperwork and phone numbers for victim advocates. My mom drove Sarah's family home because her parents were too shaken to drive. The next morning, Mr. Davidson's BMW was gone. Jake wasn't at school. By lunch, everyone knew something had happened, but the rumors were all wrong. Someone said Sarah had been caught stealing. Another person heard she'd been selling substances. I wanted to scream the truth, but Sarah had begged me not to say anything. That afternoon, 2 police cars were parked outside Mr. Davidson's house. I watched from my bedroom window as they carried out boxes and a computer. Mrs. Chen from across the street was standing in her driveway, phone pressed to her ear. Within an hour, the whole neighborhood knew Mr. Davidson had been arrested. Sarah didn't come to school for 3 days. When she finally showed up, she looked exhausted. The principal called her to the office during first period and she didn't come back. Later, I found out they were setting up a safety plan and changing her schedule so she wouldn't have to walk past Mr. Davidson's house anymore. The whispers started immediately. "I heard she seduced him," Ashley said in the bathroom. My mom said she was always dressed inappropriately when she went over there. I slammed my textbook on the sink counter. "She's 16, I snapped. "He's 38, do the math." But the damage was spreading. Sarah's Instagram was flooded with anonymous messages calling her names I won't repeat. Someone created a fake account with her photos and horrible captions. Her mom had to call the school about cyberbullying, but they said there wasn't much they could do about off-campus social media. Mr. Davidson posted bail 2 days later. His brother-in-law, some hotshot lawyer from the city, had driven up immediately. Suddenly, Mr. Davidson was the victim. He started telling anyone who would listen that Sarah had been obsessed with him, that she'd stolen money from his house when she babysat. He claimed she'd threatened to lie about him if he didn't buy her things. Mrs. Patterson, who lived next door to him, believed every word. "That girl was always hanging around," she told my mom at the grocery store. "Poor Michael was just trying to help her and look what happened." My mom's response was icy. Poor Michael is a predator who groomed a child, but not everyone saw it that way. The neighborhood split into camps. 3 families wrote character letters for Mr. Davidson, saying they'd noticed Sarah acting inappropriately around him. They described her clothes, her flirtatious behavior, how she'd sometimes touch his arm when they talked. It made me sick. Sarah's family started getting phone calls at night, just breathing at first, then hang-ups. Her mom's tires were slashed twice in 1 week. The security cameras somehow didn't catch anything. The police said without proof, they couldn't connect it to Mr. Davidson. School became unbearable for Sarah. Someone spray-painted "liar" on her locker. Girls she'd known since kindergarten crossed the street to avoid her. Even some teachers seemed uncomfortable around her. Mrs. Henderson, who'd written her a glowing recommendation letter just months before, now barely made eye contact. The worst part was Jake. The custody agreement meant he still spent weekdays with his dad. Mr. Davidson filled his head with poison about Sarah. Jake started telling kids at school that Sarah was trying to break up his family, that she was jealous of his mom. Sarah's little brother came home crying because Jake had shoved him at recess and called his sister terrible names. Sarah quit her job at the ice cream shop after Mr. Davidson started showing up during her shifts. He'd order a single scoop and sit by the window for hours, just staring at her. Her manager tried to ban him, but his lawyer sent a threatening letter about discrimination and defamation. The owner didn't want legal trouble, so Sarah had to leave instead. The prosecutor assigned to the case was a tired-looking man named Mr. Garrett, who had dark circles under his eyes and a stack of files that reached his chin. He met with Sarah's family and explained the reality. Without physical evidence, it would be her word against his. The pregnancy was proof of sexual contact, but Mr. Davidson was already claiming it was consensual, that Sarah had lied about her age. "These cases can take 12 to 18 months to go to trial," Mr. Garrett said, "and I need to be honest. Without DNA evidence or witnesses, it's going to be difficult." Sarah had already terminated the pregnancy, unable to face carrying her abuser's child. The medical medical records would help, but they needed more. That's when things got worse. Mr. Davidson's lawyer filed a countersuit claiming defamation and emotional distress. He demanded damages for lost income, saying the false accusations had cost his client his reputation. They subpoenaed Sarah's phone records, her social media, even her diary. Everything became evidence. Sarah started having panic attacks. She'd freeze in the middle of class, gasping for air. The school counselor was overwhelmed and could only see her once a week. Her grades plummeted. The straight A's she'd worked so hard for turned into C's and D's. Her early acceptance to State University was in jeopardy. One night, Sarah's mom called my mom in tears. They'd found Sarah in the bathroom with a bottle of pills, though she hadn't taken any yet. The crisis counselor at the hospital recommended intensive therapy, but the waitlist was 2 months long. They found a private therapist, but insurance wouldn't cover it because it was out of network. Sarah's parents took out a loan. Hannah Davidson, Mr. Davidson's ex-wife, wanted to help. She knew things, had seen patterns, but her lawyer warned that getting involved could jeopardize her custody of Jake. She was already fighting to limit Michael's access, but the court favored maintaining both parents' involvement. She sent one anonymous note to the prosecutor mentioning Michael's history with young babysitters, but couldn't risk more. The pretrial hearings were brutal. Mr. Davidson's lawyer, his brother-in-law Marcus, twisted everything. He presented texts where Sarah had sent heart emojis, messages saying she missed Mr. Davidson when he traveled for work. He made her normal teenage expressions of affection sound calculating and seductive. Sarah's lawyer, a public defender named Ms. Rodriguez, fought back hard. She showed the context, how Mr. Davidson had initiated every conversation, how he'd asked what Sarah was wearing, if she had a boyfriend, if she'd ever been kissed. She presented the credit card records showing he'd bought her jewelry, expensive clothes, things no normal employer would give a teenage babysitter. But Marcus Davidson was relentless. He brought in character witnesses who painted his client as a devoted father, a community volunteer, a victim of a troubled teenager's fantasies. He wore his wedding ring to every hearing, brought his elderly parents to sit in the gallery. His mother would dab at her eyes with a handkerchief whenever Sarah spoke. 2 other families in the neighborhood quietly pulled their daughters from activities Mr. Davidson volunteered at. The soccer team he assistant coached suddenly had several players quit, but none of them would make official statements. They didn't want their daughters dragged into it, didn't want to become targets themselves. One night at 2 a.m., Sarah's neighbor Mrs. Kim saw Mr. Davidson's car parked across from Sarah's house. She called the police immediately, but he drove away before they arrived. The patrol officer said without him committing a crime, there was nothing they could do. The restraining order only covered direct contact. Sarah's therapy sessions became her lifeline. Dr. Patel taught her grounding techniques for the panic attacks, helped her practice testimony without breaking down. They worked on separating her sense of self from what had happened to her. Slowly, painfully, Sarah began to reclaim small pieces of herself. But the trial date kept getting pushed back. First because the court was overloaded, then because Marcus Davidson filed motion after motion. Each delay meant more months of limbo, more time for the community to forget the initial shock and start believing the counter-narrative. Some people began to rewrite history. They'd say she was always mature for her age. They'd say, very developed. As if Sarah's body was somehow complicit. They forgot she was a child who'd needed permission slips for field trips just 2 years ago. The financial strain on Sarah's family was enormous. Legal fees, therapy costs, security systems after the vandalism. Her dad took on extra shifts. Her mom started selling things online. The family vacation they'd saved for was canceled. Her little brother's birthday party was scaled down to just cake at home. Sarah tried to return to normal life, but normal was gone. She couldn't concentrate on schoolwork when she might have to testify about the worst moments of her life. She couldn't hang out with friends who still followed Mr. Davidson's son on Instagram. She couldn't walk past his house without feeling sick. The scholarship letter came on a Tuesday. Full ride to State University for academic excellence. Sarah had dreamed of this moment since middle school. She held the letter and cried, knowing her grades had dropped too much to maintain the requirements. Another thing he'd stolen from her. I held Sarah while she sobbed over the scholarship letter, her tears soaking through my shirt. Her mom found us like that an hour later, took one look at the crumpled paper, and her face crumbled. The next day, Sarah's dad called State University to explain the situation. The admissions officer was sympathetic but firm. Academic standards couldn't be waived. They could defer enrollment for a year, but Sarah would need to bring her grades back up. That Thursday, Sarah's mom discovered their mailbox had been destroyed overnight. Metal twisted and bent, mail scattered across the wet grass. Among the soggy bills and flyers was a typed note. Liars get what they deserve. Sarah's dad installed a new mailbox that weekend, this time with a lock. He also put up motion sensor lights that blazed on whenever anything moved in their front yard. The neighborhood watch meeting that month was tense. Half the room avoided eye contact with Sarah's parents while the other half sat protectively near them. Mr. O'Alexander, who organized the meetings, tried to keep things neutral, but the elephant in the room was suffocating. When Sarah's mom brought up the vandalism, Mrs. Patterson muttered something about natural consequences of false accusations. Sarah's dad stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. My mom grabbed his arm before he could respond. They left early, and 3 other families followed them out in solidarity. Sarah started eating lunch in the library. The cafeteria had become a minefield of whispers and stares. I joined her every day, bringing extra snacks because she'd stopped buying lunch. The librarian, Mrs. McVictoria, never said anything about the food, just smiled sadly and made sure we had a quiet corner table. Sometimes other kids would drift over, the ones who believed Sarah or simply didn't care about the drama. We formed an unofficial support group without ever acknowledging it. Jake's behavior at school escalated. He cornered Sarah's brother during PE and shoved him into the equipment closet, telling him his sister was going to hell for lying. The PE teacher, who hadn't seen the actual shove, gave both boys detention for roughhousing. Sarah's parents met with the principal but were told that without witnesses, it was one child's word against another. They couldn't prove Jake was targeting their son because of the situation with his father. The pretrial motions continued. Marcus Davidson filed to have Sarah's medical records from the pregnancy termination excluded, arguing they were prejudicial. He wanted her diary thrown out, claiming it was obtained improperly. He challenged the authenticity of the text messages, suggesting they could have been doctored. Each motion meant another hearing, another day Sarah had to miss school, another delay. Sarah's part-time job applications were all rejected. The ice cream shop incident had spread through the small business community. Nobody wanted to risk Mr. Davidson showing up at their establishment. Even the library, where Sarah had volunteered since middle school, suddenly didn't need help with their summer reading program. Her college savings dwindled as her parents used it for therapy copays. One afternoon, I was walking home when I saw Mr. Davidson at the grocery store. He was chatting with another dad from the neighborhood, laughing like he didn't have a care in the world. When he saw me, his smile widened. "Tell your friend I hope she gets the help she needs," he said loudly enough for other shoppers to hear. Mental illness in teenagers is so tragic. I wanted to scream, but I just walked away, my hands shaking with rage. Sarah's panic attacks got worse. During a biology test, she started hyperventilating when the teacher walked behind her desk. Something about the cologne he wore. She ran out of the classroom and locked herself in a bathroom stall. The teacher marked her test as incomplete. When she tried to explain later, he suggested she get a doctor's note for her condition. The implication was clear. He thought she was faking it for attention. Hannah Davidson reached out through a mutual friend. She couldn't contact Sarah's family directly because of her lawyer's warnings, but she passed along information. There had been a babysitter in Arizona, a girl named Ailey who was 17, another girl before that in Nevada. Always teenagers, always from families who needed money, always ending when the girls aged out or spoke up, but none of them had pressed charges. The fear, the shame, the community pressure, it had silenced them all. mall. The anonymous harassment intensified. Sarah's family found their garbage cans overturned every trash day. Their doorbell would ring at 3 a.m. with no one there. Pizza deliveries they didn't order showed up demanding payment. The police took reports but said it was probably just pranks. They increased patrols but somehow never caught anyone. Sarah's little brother started having nightmares. He'd wake up screaming about bad men coming to hurt his sister. Their parents found him sleeping on the floor outside Sarah's room one night, a baseball bat clutched in his small hands. He was 8 years old and trying to protect his family. Sarah cried when she saw him there, guilt eating her alive for bringing this into their lives. The school's zero-tolerance policy on bullying seemed to have exceptions. When Sarah reported the Instagram harassment, she was told to simply block the accounts. When SLT appeared on her locker in permanent marker, the janitor painted over it, but no investigation followed. When someone put a printout of the statutory RP laws in her backpack with liar written across it, the administration suggested she might want to consider online school for her own comfort. Mr. Garrett, the prosecutor, called with bad news. The judge had granted several of Marcus Davidson's motions. Sarah's diary entries from before she met Mr. Davidson would be admissible. Marcus argued they showed a pattern of romantic fantasizing. The medical records could be discussed, but not the specific details of the termination. The defense would be allowed to question Sarah extensively about her asexual history, despite her age. Sarah's mom quit her job to homeschool Sarah for the remainder of junior year. They couldn't afford it, but they couldn't afford to let Sarah fall apart either. Every morning, they'd sit at the kitchen table with textbooks and try to pretend things were normal. Sarah would get through math and English, but history class, with its lessons on justice and democracy, often ended in tears. The community center where Mr. Davidson volunteered refused to remove him from his position. He coached youth soccer and ran the financial literacy program for teens. Parents who believed him made a point of signing their kids up for his programs, a show of support that felt like a slap in the face. Sarah's family had to watch him drive past their house every Saturday morning, a line of kids in his car for practice. Dr. Patel increased Sarah's therapy sessions to twice a week. They worked on visualization exercises for the courtroom, practicing staying calm under hostile questioning. Sarah would come home exhausted, her eyes red and puffy. But slowly, she was building the tools to survive what was coming. Her hands shook less. She could talk about that night without vomiting. Progress measured in tiny, painful increments. The trial date was finally set, 14 months after that night in my bathroom when Sarah told me the truth. Marcus Davidson immediately filed for another postponement, claiming he needed more time to prepare. The judge denied it. A date circled in red on the calendar became Sarah's focal point. Equal parts hope and dread. More families quietly distanced themselves from Mr. Davidson. The Nathaniel family stopped inviting him to barbecues. The youth soccer team found a new assistant coach. But these silent defections weren't public support for Sarah. They were just people protecting their own children while avoiding the conflict. The neighborhood remained divided, with the vocal supporters of Mr. Davidson drowning out the quiet doubters. Sarah's 18th birthday approached with none of the joy it should have held. No party plans, no excitement about official adulthood. Just the grim realization that Mr. Davidson's defense would paint her as a legal adult who had seduced an innocent man. Never mind that the relationship started when she was 16. Marcus Davidson would twist time itself to serve his narrative. 2 weeks before the trial, another girl came forward. Lex was 19 now, had babysat for Mr. Davidson 4 years ago in Arizona. She'd seen the news about Sarah's case online and contacted the prosecutor. Her story was eerily similar. The gifts, the compliments about maturity, the gradual escalation. She'd been 15. She'd never told anyone until now. But Lex lived across the country and was terrified to testify. She had a new life, was in college, had a boyfriend who didn't know about her past. Flying her in would cost money the prosecution didn't have. Her testimony via video link would be less impactful, and Marcus Davidson would tear her apart, claim she was just seeking attention or money. Sarah's family put their house on the market. Win or lose, they couldn't stay in the neighborhood. The realtor warned them that the situation was known and might affect the sale price. They'd take the loss. Anything to get away from the daily reminders, the hostile stares, the whispered conversations that stopped when they walked by. Jake's behavior towards Sarah's brother escalated to the point where the school had to separate them completely. Different lunch periods, different recess times, assigned seats on opposite ends of the classroom. Hannah Davidson tried to get Jake into therapy, but Mr. Davidson refused to consent. He told Jake that therapy was for weak people and liars. The poison spread deeper. The final pre-trial hearing was a disaster. Marcus Davidson announced he had a surprise witness, a girl from Sarah's school who would testify that Sarah had bragged about seducing an older man for money. My heart sank when I saw who it was. Ailey, who'd been cut from the cheerleading squad last year and blamed Sarah for not putting in a good word with the captain. Her testimony would be lies, but believable lies. Sarah's lawyer fought to exclude Ailey's testimony, but the judge allowed it. Ms. Rodriguez's resources were stretched thin. She had 30 other cases and no private investigator to dig into Ailey's motivations. She'd do her best to discredit her on cross-examination, but the damage would be done. Another teenage girl saying Sarah was lying would resonate with the jury. 3 days before the trial, Sarah's mom found her in the garage with the car running, not trying to hurt herself, just sitting there, listening to music, pretending she could drive away from all of this. They talked for hours in that garage, engine off, about survival and justice, and the difference between winning and enduring. Sarah agreed to keep fighting, but her spirit was nearly broken. The night before the trial, our friend group came over, even the ones who'd been distant, scared of choosing sides. We didn't talk about the next day. We painted our nails and watched stupid movies and ate too much junk food. For a few hours, we pretended we were just teenagers having a sleepover. Sarah smiled for the first time in weeks. When everyone left, she hugged me and whispered, "Whatever happens tomorrow, thank you for believing me." The morning of the trial, protesters stood outside the courthouse. Not many, but enough. Some holding signs supporting Sarah, others claiming she was destroying an innocent man's life. Mr. Davidson arrived in an expensive suit, his elderly parents on each arm, looking every inch the persecuted family man. Sarah threw up twice before we even got inside. The courtroom smelled like old wood and floor polish. Sarah's family filled one side of the gallery. Mr. Davidson's supporters filled the other. I sat directly behind Sarah, close enough to see her hands trembling as she placed them on the table. Ms. Rodriguez squeezed her shoulder and whispered something that made Sarah nod and sit up straighter. Jury selection had been careful. 7 women, 5 men, different ages, backgrounds, experiences, but looking at their faces, I couldn't tell who would believe a teenage girl over a well-dressed man with an expensive lawyer. Marcus Davidson smiled at each juror like they were old friends. Ms. Rodriguez maintained professional distance. The contrast was intentional and effective. The opening statement set the tone. Ms. Rodriguez laid out the facts simply. A trusted adult had used his position to groom and abuse a vulnerable teenager. She promised evidence of gifts, inappropriate messages, and a pattern of predatory behavior. She asked the jury to see past the defendant's image to the truth underneath. Marcus Davidson painted a different picture. A successful man trying to help a troubled teenager who developed an unhealthy obsession. A girl who pursued him relentlessly, lied about her age, threatened him when he tried to establish boundaries. He used words like false allegations and rushed to judgment and ruined reputation. He made Mr. Davidson sound like the real victim. The first day of testimony was technical. Phone records showing the volume and timing of messages. Credit card statements documenting expensive purchases. School records showing Sarah's declining grades after the relationship began. Dry facts that built the foundation but lacked emotional impact. The jury took notes but seemed disengaged. Sarah was scheduled to testify on day 2. That night, she didn't sleep. I stayed over and we sat on her bedroom bedroom floor going through Dr. Patel's breathing exercises. Her parents checked on us every hour, bringing tea and reassurances. When the sun came up, Sarah looked fragile but determined. She put on the conservative dress Ms. Rodriguez had chosen and practiced her testimony one more time. The courthouse was more crowded the second day. Word had spread that the victim would testify. Some people came to support Sarah, others to judge her. The protesters were louder, their signs more aggressive. Someone shoved Sarah's mom in the parking lot. Security had to escort us inside. Sarah took the stand at 9:15 a.m. Ms. Rodriguez started with easy questions. Her name, age, how she knew the defendant. Sarah's voice was quiet but steady. She described getting the tutoring job, how professional it seemed at first. She talked about Jake struggling with fractions, about making colorful study guides, about the satisfaction of seeing his grades improve. Then Ms. Rodriguez guided her through the progression. The compliments that seemed harmless at first, the text that gradually became more personal, the gifts that felt like recognition for hard work until they became something else. Sarah's voice cracked when she described the first time Mr. Davidson touched her inappropriately, but she kept going. The worst part was describing the night she realized she was pregnant. The jury leaned forward as Sarah explained how Mr. Davidson had promised they'd be together, how he'd convinced her that their relationship was special and real. She talked about the fear, the shame, the moment she finally broke down and told me. Several jurors were visibly uncomfortable. Marcus Davidson's cross-examination was brutal. He started gently, almost sympathetically before twisting the knife. He questioned every detail, suggested alternative interpretations, highlighted inconsistencies. He showed the jury Sarah's diary entries about wanting to fall in love, implying she'd projected fantasies onto his client. He brought up the heart emojis in her texts, the times she'd initiated contact. "Isn't it true," Marcus said, holding up a printed text message, "that you told my client you were 18? Sarah's hands gripped the witness stand. "He never asked my age. He knew I was 16. He knew I went to high school with his son." But Marcus had planted the seed of doubt. The character assassination continued. Marcus questioned why Sarah had continued babysitting after the alleged abuse began, why she'd accepted gifts if she felt uncomfortable, why she'd deleted certain text messages but kept others. Each question was designed to make her look calculating rather than victimized. Sarah broke down when Marcus showed photos from her Instagram, pictures of her in the clothes Mr. Davidson had bought, smiling and looking happy. "You don't look like someone being abused," he said. Ms. Rodriguez objected, but the damage was done. The jury had seen a teenage girl who appeared to be enjoying expensive gifts. Ale testified that afternoon. She claimed Sarah had bragged about having a rich older boyfriend who bought her whatever she wanted. She said Sarah had laughed about how easy it was to manipulate him. Every word was a lie, but Ale sold it with tears and apparent reluctance to betray a friend. Two jurors nodded along with her testimony. Ms. Rodriguez's cross-examination revealed that Ale had applied for the same scholarship Sarah had won last year, that there was bad blood between them. But teenage drama seemed petty compared to the serious allegations. Ale stuck to her story, even adding details about Sarah supposedly showing off the jewelry at school. "I wanted to scream that I'd been there, that none of it happened that way." Mr. Davidson testified on day 3. Marcus had coached him well. He wore a simple suit, no flashy watch or rings. He spoke softly, sadly, about trying to help a student who reminded him of his own struggles in school. He admitted buying gifts, but framed them as a mentor's encouragement. He portrayed Sarah as increasingly demanding and unstable. The texts were explained away as misunderstandings. The late-night messages were about Jake's homework. The personal questions were friendly concern. The gifts were rewards for academic achievement. He actually cried when describing how the allegations had destroyed his relationship with his son and ruined his reputation in the community. When Ms. Rodriguez cross-examined him, Mr. Davidson remained calm. He had an answer for everything. Why did he text a 16-year-old at 3 a.m.? He was an insomniac who forgot about appropriate hours. Why did he buy her jewelry? She'd mentioned feeling insecure and he wanted to boost her confidence. Every predatory action was reframed as kindness. The prosecution's surprise came when Lex testified via video link. Her story mirrored Sarah's. The tutoring, the gifts, the gradual escalation, the promises of a future together. She was composed but clearly traumatized, describing how she dropped out of high school after the relationship ended. But the video quality was poor, and Marcus objected repeatedly, breaking up her testimony. Marcus's cross-examination of Lex was vicious. He questioned why she'd waited 4 years to come forward. He suggested she'd seen news coverage and wanted attention. He implied she and Sarah had coordinated their stories. Lex grew flustered, confused dates and details. The jury seemed skeptical of her testimony by the end. Hannah Davidson wasn't allowed to testify about her ex-husband's patterns, but she sat in the gallery every day. Her presence was a silent statement, but Marcus made sure to note during closing arguments that a bitter ex-wife might coach her son to lie. He suggested the entire case was a custody ploy that had spiraled out of control. The closing arguments took most of day 4. Ms. Rodriguez methodically reviewed the evidence, the gifts, the messages, the pattern of behavior, 2 separate victims with similar stories. She asked the jury to remember what it was like to be 16, to consider the power imbalance between a teenage girl and a wealthy adult man. She showed them Sarah's grade reports, her college acceptance letter, all the potential that had been derailed. Marcus Davidson's closing was a masterpiece of manipulation. He painted his client as a victim of cancel culture, a good man destroyed by lies and assumptions. He highlighted every inconsistency in Sarah's testimony, every moment of Ale's supposed proof. He asked the jury if they were really prepared to send an innocent man to prison, based on the word of a teenager who'd admitted to lying to her parents about where she was at night. The jury deliberated for 5 days. 5 days of Sarah throwing up every morning, unable to eat or sleep. 5 days of protesters growing louder and more aggressive. 5 days of anonymous calls to Sarah's house with graphic threats. 5 days of the community holding its breath. When the verdict came, Sarah gripped my hand so tight I thought bones might break. The foreman stood, cleared his throat, and read, "Guilty of statutory RP, not guilty of grooming, not guilty of providing alcohol to a minor." A partial victory that felt like a defeat. Mr. Davidson's face remained calm, but his hands shook as they cuffed him. The sentencing would come later, but the judge revoked bail. Mr. Davidson was led away while his elderly mother sobbed. His supporters erupted in anger, shouting about injustice and lies. Sarah's family was rushed out a back entrance for their safety. In the car, Sarah stared out the window in shock. "It's over," she whispered, but we all knew it wasn't. The next morning, for sale signs appeared on 3 more houses in our neighborhood. The community was fracturing beyond repair. Some people celebrated the conviction, others planned appeals and protests. Sarah's house was egged that night, then spray painted the next. Her family packed faster, preparing to leave before sentencing. The scholarship to State University was gone forever, but the community college 2 towns over had rolling admissions. Sarah enrolled for spring semester, planning to study social work. "I want to help other girls," she told me. "I want them to know they're not alone." It wasn't the future she'd planned, but it was a future. That had to be enough. And in the end, he got 8 years.